He was the golden child, the successful son my parents adored. I was the quiet one they told to be more like my brother. When he used their love to steal everything they had, they blamed me. They thought they had me cornered, that I was broken. But they never imagined what I was doing in the dark. How do you stop a monster your family refuses to see? You don't fight him on his terms. You launch a secret financial crime investigation that will burn his entire world to the ground. Listen to my story to hear how I took down my narcissistic brother and exposed the horrifying truth he tried to bury. The final chapter is something you won't see coming. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. The moment I knew I had to destroy my brother wasn't when he stole my parents' money. It was the moment he made them thank him for it. I was sitting at their small, polished oak dining table in their quiet suburban home just outside Austin, Texas. The air conditioning hummed, fighting the brutal August heat. On the table between us was a stack of glossy brochures for something called the Pinnacle Wealth Group. My brother, Mark, sat opposite me, radiating the kind of effortless confidence that comes from a lifetime of never being told no. He was explaining, with the patient tone one uses for a particularly slow child, how he'd consolidated all of Mom and Dad's retirement accounts, their 401ks, their pensions, the whole 35 years of their working lives, into one of his high-yield investment vehicles. My mother was beaming. "It's just so wonderful, Leo," she said, her hand resting on Mark's forearm. "We were so worried about the market. Mark is taking care of everything for us now." My dad, a man who used to read the Wall Street Journal cover to cover every morning, just nodded along, a placid smile on his face. "Your brother has a real head for this stuff," he said. "Always has." I felt a cold dread creeping up my spine, a feeling I'd known my whole life. It was the Mark is right, you are wrong feeling. "What kind of vehicles?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. I tried to pick up one of the brochures, but Mark slid them away, just out of my reach. "It's complicated stuff, little brother," he said with a dismissive wave. "Proprietary algorithms, offshore diversification, you wouldn't get it. The important thing is, they're safe. Safer than they've ever been." He looked at our parents, his eyes full of practiced sincerity. "I'm going to make sure you two have the retirement you deserve." They both looked like they were about to cry with gratitude. And I felt like I was going to be sick, because I knew Mark. I knew the real Mark, the one who existed behind the tailored suits and the perfect smile. I was the family historian of his private atrocities. I remembered him stealing $20 from my wallet when I was 12, and then convincing my parents I'd lost it and was lying to cover it up. I remembered him taking credit for my winning science fair project in high school, telling everyone he'd mentored me through it. I remembered him borrowing $5,000 for a down payment on his first BMW, a loan I never saw a penny of again, and which my parents told me to let go because family helps family. Every single time I was the one who was too sensitive, too dramatic, the one holding a grudge. And he was just Mark. Ambitious, charming, a little reckless, but always with a good heart. That's the story my family told themselves, a story they needed to believe. The cognitive dissonance of seeing their golden child for the predator he was would have shattered them. So they chose blindness. "I just think," I started, trying to keep my voice even, "that Mom and Dad should have independent oversight. Maybe talk to a third-party financial advisor, just to, you know." Mark's smile tightened at the edges. It was the only sign he was annoyed. To everyone else he was a mask of calm concern. "Leo, I am a financial advisor. A very successful one. Are you implying I don't have their best interests at heart? My own parents?" He turned to Mom. I'm a little hurt he'd think that." And just like that, the switch was flipped. My mother's face went from adoration for Mark to disappointment in me. "Leo, that's a terrible thing to suggest," she said, her voice sharp. Mark is doing us a huge favor. You should be thanking him." The gaslighting was so reflexive, so practiced it was almost elegant. In the space of 30 seconds, I had gone from raising a reasonable concern to being an ungrateful accusatory son. My father shook his head. "You've always been jealous of your brother's success, son. It's not a good look. Learned helplessness is a funny thing. You're not born with it. It's beaten into you, one quiet invalidation at a time. For years I had fought. I had brought evidence. I had argued, and every single time I'd been made to feel like I was crazy. So I had learned to just go quiet, to retreat into my own world, where things still made sense. I'd built a small but decent life for myself. I was a graphic designer. I lived in a small rental downtown. I paid my bills. I wasn't Mark, with his sprawling house in Westlake and his European cars, but I was honest, and in my family that made me the failure. I looked at my parents' faces, so full of trust for the wolf they'd invited into their henhouse, and I just nodded. "And you're right. I'm sorry," I muttered. The apology tasted like ash in my mouth. Mark gave me a magnanimous smile, the king forgiving a foolish peasant, and patted my shoulder. "It's okay, Leo. I know you just worry, but trust me, everything's under control." I drove back to my apartment that night with a knot in my stomach so tight it felt like a fist. I knew, with a certainty that was absolute, that my parents were going to lose everything. Mark wasn't just reckless. There was a darkness in him, a hollowness where empathy should be. He didn't see people, he saw resources, and he had just acquired the biggest resource of his life. For the next 6 months, life was a performance. Mark would call family dinners where he'd present beautifully fabricated quarterly reports from the Pinnacle Wealth Group, showing impressive, almost unbelievable gains. My parents would clap and toast to their brilliant son. I would sit there, drinking my wine, a polite smile plastered on my face while my insides screamed. I tried to bring it up to my dad once gently. I'd found that the Pinnacle Wealth Group had no physical office, just a PON box in the Cayman Islands. "It's an offshore fund, Leo," my dad explained, parroting Mark's lines perfectly. "That's how they get such great returns. Less regulation. It's all perfectly legal." Mark explained it. Of course he did. My attempts were like throwing pebbles at a fortress. The walls of their denial were too high, built over a lifetime of Mark's careful manipulation. The real breaking point, the moment my passive dread turned into cold, hard action, came on a Tuesday. My mom called me, frantic. My dad had fallen and broken his hip. He was in the hospital, and he needed surgery. It was serious, but he was going to be okay. After the initial panic subsided, the practicalities set in. The insurance will cover most of it," my mom said, her voice trembling, "but the surgeon they recommend is out of network. We'll have to pay a big chunk of it up front." I called Mark to get some money moved from the investment account, but he's not answering. "He's probably busy, Mom," I said, a cold premonition washing over me. "I'll try him." I tried him. I called his cell, voicemail. I called his office, a generic recording. I texted him using all caps. "Dad is in the hospital. Need to talk now. Emergency." Hours passed, nothing. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. My mom was a wreck. Finally, I just put it on my credit card, all of it. $15,000. It was nearly my entire savings, moved to my credit line to cover the charge. I felt the financial floor drop out from under me, but what choice did I have? Mark finally called me back at 11 o'clock that night. He didn't sound panicked or apologetic. He sounded annoyed. "I was in a meeting," he said, his voice clipped. "What's the big emergency?" I explained everything. The fall, the surgery, the out-of-network cost. I waited for him to say, "Oh my God, is he okay? Don't worry about the money, I'll transfer it right now." That's not what he said. He sighed, a long, put-upon sigh. "Leo, you can't just pull money out of these funds. They're long-term investments. There are massive penalties for early withdrawal. You should have called me before you did anything." My blood ran cold. "It's their money. It's for emergencies. This is an emergency. An emergency is a market crash, not a broken bone," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "This is exactly why I manage their portfolio. To protect them from emotional, short-sighted decisions like this. You've probably cost them thousands in penalties now." I was so stunned I couldn't speak. He was scolding me. He was scolding me for paying for our father's surgery. My hand was shaking as I held the phone. "So you're saying you can't get the money?" "I'm saying it's not as simple as you think. I'll see what I can do, but it's going to take time to liquidate things without taking a huge loss." "You were impulsive." Hung up. I stood in the sterile, quiet hospital hallway, the smell of antiseptic burning my nose, and I felt a lifetime of suppressed rage finally break through the surface of my learned helplessness. He wasn't going to see what he could do. There was no money, or at least, none for us. He had taken it, all of it, and he was using his financial jargon and his carefully constructed persona as a shield. That was the night the old Leo died. The one who went quiet, who apologized for things he didn't do, who let his brother walk all over him. I walked back to my dad's room, where my mom was asleep in a chair, and I looked at my father, sleeping fitfully, a proud man made small and vulnerable. And I made a promise. I wasn't going to get our money back by asking. I was going to get it back by burning Mark's entire world to the ground. He thought this was a family squabble. He had no idea what I was about to turn it into. He thought I was a graphic designer. He was about to find out that my real talent wasn't art. It was research. Obsessive, meticulous, unforgiving research. The financial crime investigation into Mark Hamilton began that night, in the fluorescent gloom of St. John, David's medical center, with a $15,000 hole in my life and a heart full of ice. The first rule of hunting a narcissist is, you never let him know he's being hunted. Mark thrived on attention, on conflict, on drama he could control. An open confrontation would have been a gift to him. He would have twisted my accusations into the ravings of a jealous, unstable brother, and our parents, his willing accomplices, would have backed his play. He expected me to scream, to threaten, to make a scene. So I did the opposite. I became a ghost. I started by playing the part he'd cast me in, the penitent, foolish little brother. I called him the next day. "Mark, you were right," I said, my voice thick with fake shame. "I was impulsive. I should have trusted you. I'm sorry. I just panicked when I saw Dad like that." So I could almost hear him preen through the phone. "It's all right, Leo," he said, his tone now generous and forgiving. "Yeah, I understand. Family first. Don't worry about the 15 grand. Consider it a loan. Just check with me next time, okay?" "I will," I promised. "Thank you, Mark. You're a lifesaver." It was one of the hardest conversations of my life, but it was necessary. It put him at ease. He thought I was back in my box. He had no idea I was building his coffin. My small Austin apartment transformed into a war room. My graphic design work, my actual job, became an afterthought. I worked late into the night, surrounded by whiteboards, sticky notes, and the glow of 3 monitors. This wasn't just about finding stolen money anymore. This was about understanding the machine Mark had built. I started with the Pinnacle Wealth Group. As Dad had said, it was a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. Untraceable on the surface, but shells have to be paid for. They have to be maintained by a registered agent, a local law firm that acts as the public face. It took me a week of deep diving into obscure corporate registry databases, but I found it. A tiny boutique law firm called Sovereign Trust Management. I couldn't get their client list, of course, but I could find out who owned Sovereign Trust Management. A few more days of digging through international business filings, cross-referencing names and addresses, and I found a name, a holding company based in Delaware. And who was the sole director of that Delaware holding company? Mark Hamilton. My brother didn't just use a shell corporation, he owned the company that provided the shells. It was a brilliantly narcissistic piece of architecture, a maze where he was the only one with the map. He was charging his clients, our parents, exorbitant fees that he was, in essence, paying to himself. That was layer 1. The next layer was the money itself. Where did it go? I knew Mark's lifestyle was expensive, but it wasn't drain your parents' entire life savings expensive. He was hiding it, or more likely he was moving it. I hired a forensic accountant, an old college acquaintance who owed me a favor. I paid him in cash and told him it was for a hypothetical case study on a competitor's business practices. I gave him everything I had, the fake Pinnacle statements Mark had given my parents, Mark's public business address, his known assets. 2 weeks later he called me. "Leo," he said, his voice grim, "this isn't a case study, this is a hornet's nest. Your competitor isn't just skimming off the top. This guy is a professional money launderer." My heart hammered against my ribs. He explained it to me in simple terms. Mark was using our parents' clean, hard-earned money as a loss leader. He'd taken large sums of dirty cash from, well, my guy couldn't be sure, but he said the pattern suggested everything from black market pharmaceuticals to tax evasion schemes. Mark would mix that dirty money with my parents' clean money in the Pinnacle Fund. Then he'd intentionally make a series of bad trades, losing my parents' money on paper. But the money wasn't gone. It was just moved, through a dozen microtransactions, to other accounts, emerging clean. He was using our family's life savings to wash criminal cash and paying himself handsomely for the service. The glossy reports he showed Mom and Dad showing gains, they were pure fiction, generated from a simple spreadsheet. The scale of it was breathtaking. My brother wasn't just a thief. He was a major player in a criminal enterprise. And the most sickening part? He was using our parents' trust as his primary shield. Who would ever investigate a son managing his elderly parents' retirement fund? It was the perfect cover. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place by accident. Mark, in his arrogance, had set up a shared family photo cloud. He'd done it years ago, another grand gesture of keeping the family connected. My parents and I were all on it. I never used it. But one night, on a whim, I logged in, and I found a folder that wasn't meant for me. It was labeled business receipts. I guess in his mind it was so boring no one would ever click on it. It was a treasure trove. Scanned receipts for lavish dinners, wire transfer confirmations to offshore accounts, flight records to Panama and Switzerland. But the most damning thing was a short audio file. It was a voice memo, likely recorded by accident. It was Mark, talking to someone on the phone. "Tom, no. I'm sure no, the old man won't be a problem," Mark was saying, his voice cold and clinical. "He believes anything I tell him. The beauty of it is, the more money they lose, the more they depend on me. It's a self-perpetuating system. By the time they realize the well is dry, they'll be too old and too broke to do anything about it. I'll just put them in a nice state-funded home and call it a day." I listened to it 3 times. The casual cruelty, the utter lack of humanity. He wasn't just stealing from them. He was engineering their complete and total dependency on him, cementing his role as their savior while he bled them dry. That was his endgame. To leave them with nothing, so he could be their everything. That recording was my weapon. But I knew I couldn't just play it for my parents. Mark's trauma bond with them was too strong. He would have told them it was fake, that I had used my tech skills to manufacture it. He would have turned them against me so completely, I'd never be able to reach them again. No, this had to be surgical. My opportunity came a month later. Mark called another family summit. My dad was out of the hospital, recovering slowly, and the medical bills were piling up. My parents were getting nervous. Mark, sensing their fear, decided to get ahead of it. He called us all to his monstrously large house in Westlake. It was an intervention. For me, I walked in and saw them all sitting in the living room, my mom, my dad, and Mark at the center, looking grave and concerned. This was his stage. "Leo, we're worried about you," Mark began, his voice dripping with faux compassion. "Mom and Dad told me you've been distant. You've been asking strange questions about my business. They say you seem paranoid." My mother wrung her hands. "You're just not yourself, honey. You look tired. You're obsessed with this money thing," my father chimed in, his voice firm. I'm nodding, his voice firm. "Your brother is the only thing keeping us afloat, Leo. Your attitude is causing your mother a great deal of stress. We think you need to talk to someone. Maybe get some help." They had rehearsed this. It was a coordinated attack, designed to isolate me and label me as mentally unstable for questioning the king. The old me would have shattered. The old me would have screamed and cried and proven their point for them. But the new me just smiled. A calm, serene smile. I let them talk for 20 minutes. I let them list all my perceived failings, my jealousy, my paranoia, my lack of gratitude. I absorbed it all. With every word they spoke, they were digging Mark's grave a little deeper. Because my new iPhone was on the coffee table, screen down. And it had been recording since the moment I walked in. When they were finally done, I took a slow breath. "You know what?" I said softly. "You know what?" They all looked stunned. They had expected a fight. "Son, under a lot of stress," I continued, looking Mark directly in the eye. "And maybe I haven't been able to see things clearly. You're right, Mark. You are the expert. I'm just a graphic designer. What do I know about proprietary algorithms and offshore diversification?" I used his exact words. His ego swelled. He thought he had broken me. "I'm glad you see that, little brother," he said, patting my arm. "I do," I said, "and I'm sorry. I'm going to stop worrying you all. I'll get some help." I left their house that night feeling lighter than I had in my entire life. I had the final piece of evidence, a 22-minute recording of my brother and my parents conspiring to gaslight me over a massive financial crime. The next morning I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't confront anyone. I compiled everything into a single encrypted digital folder. The Cayman and Delaware corporate filings, the forensic accountant's report with his name redacted, the travel receipts. The first audio file of Mark talking about putting our parents in a home, and the second audio file of my own intervention. I wrote a detailed anonymous cover letter explaining the entire scheme from start to finish. I explained how the Pinnacle Wealth Group was a front for a money laundering operation, and how Mark Hamilton was using his elderly parents as the initial seed capital and legal shield. I submitted the entire package through the CC's anonymous tip portal. Then I sent another copy to the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division, and then I waited. For 3 months, nothing happened. Life went on. Mark was more smug than ever. My parents treated me with a new pitying kindness, as if I were a convalescing patient. I played my part. I was quiet, agreeable. I went to family dinners and nodded along. Inside, I was a coiled spring. The call came on a Wednesday morning. It was my mom, and she was hysterical. "Leo, you have to come over. It's Mark. There are men here. Federal agents. They're taking him." I drove over, my heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. The street was full of black cars. FBI agents in windbreakers were carrying boxes of files out of my brother's mansion. Mark was being led out in handcuffs, his perfect suit rumpled, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. He saw me standing across the street and his eyes locked onto mine. In that moment he knew. He knew it was me. He opened his mouth to scream something, but an agent pushed his head down and shoved him into the back of a car. My parents ran to me, weeping. "How could this happen?" my dad cried. "It must be a mistake, a misunderstanding," and I looked at them, at their shattered faces, and I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a profound, aching sadness. "No, Dad," I said, my voice clear and steady for the first time in their presence. "It's not a mistake. The aftermath was brutal. The investigation revealed everything. Mark had stolen over $1.2 million from my parents and laundered nearly $10 million more from other sources. He was facing a litany of federal charges. His assets were frozen. My parents were left with almost nothing but their house. They were broken, not just financially but emotionally. Their entire worldview, with Mark at the center, had been incinerated. They didn't speak to me for a year. In their grief, they still saw me as the catalyst, the one who brought the storm down on them. But the evidence was too overwhelming to deny. Eventually, my dad called. He didn't apologize, not really. But he asked for my help sorting through the legal papers. It was a start. My brother took a plea deal. He'll be in a federal prison for the next 15 years. The state seized most of the stolen assets, but the government has a victim restitution fund. My parents might, one day, get a fraction of their money back. I still live in my small apartment in Austin. It's quiet now. The hate has faded, replaced by a kind of peaceful emptiness. I didn't get the money back, not really. I didn't get my family back, not the one I thought I wanted. But I got something more valuable. I got myself back. I stood up to the monster my family refused to see, not with fists or with anger, but with cold, hard truth.